Heyo folks, this is Ham the Guinness Gamer here again, bringing you my next video on PAX Day. Today's video is going to be about the weaponsmithing profession, how it is currently split into two sections, how it is currently and how I think it could be improved greatly. Before I get into that though, if you like this video, give me like, subscribe, any comments make, leave them down below please, blah blah blah. But for now, I'll get straight into it. Weaponsmithing as it is, I think it's probably one of the worst situated professions, to be honest. Mostly for one strong reason, really, and that's because there is one way to level it, and it's horrible. Basically, I'll open up the list here. There's loads and loads of different weapons that you can make. I like the selection of weapons, I suppose. You've got two-handed swords, one-handed swords, you've got spears, you've got one-handed maces, two-handed maces. You can make axes, two-handed axes, one-handed axes for weapons. You can also use weaponsmithing to make the tools. So you make the pickaxes, you make the chopping axes, and generally there's a decent selection of different types of weapons to have. The issue is that, or the one overriding issue is that there's only one logical way to level, and that is to make thousands upon thousands of spears. The reason for that is, if you look here, to find spear, it takes a lot less mats to make them, basically. And this is one type of spear. There's spears of all different tiers, I suppose, that but throughout the tiers the mats are exactly the same, except the metal increases. So these ones here are iron, later on there's wrought iron and there's steel, but they're still very, very cheap compared to the other weapons. So if you look here, the spear, that essentially uses, I think, one iron spike, two iron nails. It's like less than an ingot of iron, I'm pretty sure. Same down here for the higher, the steel spears and stuff like that. Whereas if you look at the swords here, you need a crossbar, a pommel, nails, and a couple other things. Like that sword blade, I'm pretty sure uses a couple of ingots itself. The crossbar uses some, the pommel uses some. And the worst thing was the second issue, or the way it is at the minute, is that all of those little individual weapon pieces that are very clearly weapon pieces, pommels and crossbars and blades, they're made with blacksmithing. They're not actually made with weaponsmithing. So making all of those individual items for a short sword doesn't level your weaponsmithing. The only thing that levels your weaponsmithing is 1 XP gain at the end when you're actually making the short sword, and that's it. So basically, when you want to level the way it is at the minute, you just make hundreds of spears, and that's it. Like, and I said earlier, thousands. It actually, to get to level 40, it would be thousands, because it increases with time. But I'm maybe level 34 or something at the minute, and I reckon I've made about 1500, and I'd say to get to level 40 I'd probably make another 1000 at least. And of course, what do you do with them? You throw them on the ground and you let them despawn, because nobody needs that amount of spears. And that is really how leveling weaponsmithing is at the minute, and therefore it is a very, very thankless task for anybody to get to do that. The only thing in the middle of all that is semi-useful and you don't mind doing so much is making the tools for your guild. But the tools aren't the best use of the metals, so you make as many as you need, whether that be 20, 30, 50, whatever, and put them in boxes, and then you go back to making your hundreds of spears. So that's basically how it is at the minute. How to improve that? I think it would be quite easy. There's a couple of different ways that I think you could improve it. The issues that you're trying to address are not necessarily the grindiness. I don't mind the length of time or the amount of effort it takes to actually level up, but it's just the thanklessness of that leveling up. You should never be throwing things away that you've grinded mats to go get. You should never just be grinding those mats just to turn around and dump the item that you made on the ground. That's horrible. To make anybody do that, it really is. So I mentioned this in my professions video. I think a relatively easy way to do that, first of all, would be to bring all of these different weapon parts into weaponsmithing out of blacksmithing. So Iron pommel, you make that should level your weaponsmithing. Iron crossbar, that should level your weaponsmithing. Iron sword blade should level your weaponsmithing. I mean, these things, I mean, the likes of iron nails, that can stay blacksmithing, that makes sense. Obviously, your linen threads and strings there, that makes sense for that to still be tailoring and leatherworking. But the things that are very obviously weapon parts should definitely level your weaponsmithing. Secondly, then, all of the weapons should be split up into more parts. The sword's actually a pretty good example. And if these individual parts of the sword actually leveled your weaponsmithing, you'd probably be more inclined to make more swords instead of spears, because at least then you're getting, your pommel, your crossbar, your sword blade, and then the actual final making of the sword. That's 4 different processes that are actually leveling your weaponsmithing. Now that one I'm selected there is not the best example because it needs some unique items in it. But if you just look at a basic, a rugged long sword, iron nails, iron sword blade, iron crossguard, heavy iron pommel, all of which should level your weaponsmithing, and then the final making of the weapon. So it would all of a sudden, immediately, that's 4 processes for making one weapon instead of 1 process for making one weapon. So you've already quartered the amount of weapons you actually make. What you should also do, what the dev should also do then, is add more individual parts to all of the weapons. So again, sword's a decent example because it already has a couple of different parts, but you should have other parts in there too. Could you add pegs or resin or something like that to connect some of these pieces together? How does the handle connect? How does the pommel connect to the stock? How does the crossguard connect to the pommel and connect to the stock? How does the blade connect to the the crossguard? These things are just magically pushed together as it is, but that could be a way to get another process in there, is to have something connecting those, whether it be a metal peg, a wooden peg. Probably metal would make sense if you want to be leveling your blacksmithing or your weaponsmithing, but maybe the blacksmith makes the metal peg like the blacksmith would make an iron nail, but the weaponsmith then is the one that connects that metal peg into the weapon. And all of a sudden you just create more processes in making one weapon. So I think you could add a couple of things to the sword to make it maybe 8 processes. You get to the likes of the really, really simple spears that are just a wooden stock and a steel spike, and some nails. You should really be able to add a grip to a spear. You should really be able to again add pegs or resin or something to actually attach the spike to the stock. It could also be an option then that the peg that you're putting into it, again whether metal or wooden, it could be an option that breaks, or maybe you have the option to choose either to choose either wooden or metal, and the metal one lasts longer, the wooden one's cheaper probably, but therefore if the wooden one then breaks, or if either of them break for you, maybe you have to bring it back to your weaponsmith to fix it. So that could be another way of getting XP. Just every player being able to fix their weapons, repair their weapons with no blacksmithing experience or weaponsmithing experience seems a bit silly. Whereas if they have to bring it back to your guild weaponsmith, here you go, this peg broke, or this blade needs sharpened, or my crossguard broke, defending an attack from a man with a giant great maul, things like that. You bring it back to your weaponsmith, he repairs it, he gets a bit of XP for not actually expending resources, but gets XP because he's the only one, he's put the effort in to get to that weaponsmith level, and he's the only one that can fix it, so therefore he deserves the extra free XP. Also then, because each of these individual items, look back to putting more components into a spear, he has to make the steel spike, he has to make the metal peg to attach the steel spike to the stock, he has to make maybe a metal handle even for a spear, or you could overlap You could have some carpentry in there too, where you maybe have a wooden handle, or you get the stock file down into a handle or something, and the carpenter gets some extra work in there too. Maybe individual players get the choice. Again, like you could choose the difference between a metal peg and a wooden peg. Maybe you can choose the difference between a metal handle and a wooden handle. Maybe they change the speed of the weapon, or maybe they just change the durability of the weapon, or both. You know, there's a lot of different ways that you could actually bring it to improve it, and those last couple of points there, that would make weapons for individual players kind of tailored to their play style. They'll feel unique. You'll feel like, as a weaponsmith, you'll feel like you're making, even if you're making 10 spears for 10 different people, you'll feel like it's 10 different processes, because they are 10 different spears, and there's a little bit of personality, a little bit of individualism in each of those items. And then if you're managing to get 4, 5, 6, 7 different processes for each individual item, imagine getting into, you know, each spear takes 6 processes instead of 1. So it means then to make 10 spears, then you've actually got 60 processes there. So instead of, as it is, you'll have to make 60 spears and probably throw 50 of them out, you actually are only making, you know, 10, and then you're keeping them for 10 individual players. You've got 60 points of processing XP, and there's no wastage then of what you've actually made. And you can do that with all the weapons. You know, I'm choosing spear because spear is the simplest, and therefore it would probably need the most processes added to it. But you could have extra processes in the mauls, the great mauls, the axes. You know, all of them could need file down for a start as maybe an extra process to sharpen it. That could be something that needs done on a regular basis. All of them could need just general repairs on a regular basis, and then each individual one, depending on the nature of the weapon, you could have somewhere between, say, 6 and 10 processes to actually make the weapon, with the most probably being in the sword, because a sword is more complicated. Like, I think I could bring the sword up to 10 processes easy enough by adding a couple of pegs and things into it on top of what they already have. There's only so much you could add to an actual spear, but I still think you could bring it up to 5, 6 processes easy enough without being too granular about it. And then all of a sudden, all of these thousands of weapons that I've had to make to level up my weaponsmithing to the level that it is wouldn't have to happen. Basically, I could have ended up making 100 weapons and be the same level as I am, but each of them could have taken an average of 8, 10 processes, or even if you include repairs, 15 processes, and then you've still done the same amount of grind, the same amount of work, the same amount of effort required from the player, but all it's done is take away the hatefulness of having to throw away those thousands of spears that you've made. And also what it does is it gets rid of the problem as well. Like when you're leveling up and you're making 200 spears, the time you've made those 200 spears, say you've ground all the materials like I have all at once, and then you just leave your character, go AFK and leave your character making loads of spears. When you come back, you've leveled up high enough that literally 100% of the spears that you've just made are obsolete. Because you've leveled up 2-3 levels, you can now make or reliably make the next level spear. So I see in some cases throwing out 100% of what you've made, not just 90% or whatever, which is horrible. I think with those couple of tweaks, you could turn weaponsmithing completely around, because obviously it's a very, very useful profession. Every guild is going to have at least one person doing it, because you need to make the tools and you need to make weapons, simple as. It's just about making it more fun and more engaging for the player that's grinding the stuff to actually get those levels up. As I say, that's just a quick video about my thoughts on weaponsmithing and how they can improve it in the future. And I will leave this video there. I'm going to do similar videos for all other professions that are in use in the game, but for now, wherever you are, goodbye and good luck.